Why is shame such a powerful emotion? How does it affect us mentally, physically, emotionally? I'm Nadia Davis. I'm a mom, author, attorney, and Kundalini yoga teacher who has experienced public shaming that brought me to my knees. On this podcast, I'm going to tell you how I'm living the work, taking shame out of the shadows. I'll give you real life advice and skills to take away with you throughout your day. You'll hear from powerful guests who have overcome trauma and emerged stronger than ever. You too can ban the shame within and around you. Join me. You are not alone. This is very exciting.
Yeah.
Welcome home. Welcome home to a place that should be safe and judgment-free, where we can be vulnerable without judgment so severe that it leads to shame, and we get in what I call a running to standstill mode. You too created a song. It's called Running to Standstill, and I love that song because it so pointedly explains where our mind can take us in these bodies and in these minds. And it's, this grin and bear it mode we've had since our consciousness became alive, since we were children. And as adults, it's like I see this running to standstill mode. I've seen it a lot around me, and just people's desperation to feel safe and calm in their bodies with their minds. And here we are going to work on creating a place that I call a home within. We all deserve a place. And if you can't find that place outside you, I'm here to tell you that you can create a space within you. And I call it home. So I am blown away by this partnership that evolved very organically. Today, we have our first conversation with Dr. Stephan Poulter. Now, let me tell you how this evolved. I was just searching after I self-published the book, Home is Within You, a memoir of recovery and redemption, a couple years ago. And as the novice that I am, yet just really diving into the study of shame and how it evolves, how subtle yet powerful it is, I ran into Dr. Stephan Poulter's work. And he wrote a book, a fantastic book, called The Shame Factor. So, of course, when I saw this, I looked into the book and him and was blown away. So all of this has transformed extremely organically. I reached out to him. We exchanged books. And through that process, I learned just even more about his level of expertise. He has written several books with empowering insight into how the psychology of our mind works. He is a clinical psychologist practicing for over 30 years. And the Shame Factor book in and of itself covers so much. He's going to talk about his next book, which is super powerful. But the Shame Factor, it literally says, what is shame? Our early years and where personal shame begins. Topics like no more secrets, your own healing exposure process, rewriting and rewiring our brains, plus a plethora of tips to find a mental health professional, support, and resources. And the cool thing about Dr. Stephan Poulter is that when he responded to me, he really just personally validated my own shame as well as the public shaming that I had experienced. And he said to me, "You cannot write about shame. unless you're in it. And to hear this from a shame expert and researcher was so humbling and validating as to all the layers that I was bound under, that my mind used to create, that it still uses today to create triggers that separate me from my truth, from my true self, and from other people. And then he further said that psychology, and the psychology he's going to teach us about and let us dive into through his own personal story and his research, he said psychology or psychologically is spirituality. It's seeing beyond the mind's workings and building a connection to our true self. And that is what the book Home is Within You is about. It's from my personal perspective, trying to help others have a roadmap out, have like deep insight as to how it shows up, how it just completely clobbers us, yet also just a way out. And to have an expert doctor's insight into this journey is just, it just blows my mind. So I want to first start with asking Dr. Stephan Poulter his personal story, how he began, and just thank him. I'm so blown away by this partnership, and I want to honor and respect
Oh.
the little boy within you that began this journey and start there.
Well, thank you, Nadia. It's very humbled. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be with you. And there's an old saying, "How do you write a book?" Well, I want to end up in New York. Now I got to walk back from New York. Okay, this is where I am, but how do I get to there? Writing the shame factor, I think, started, like you said, in my childhood, not really understanding these feelings and different, at times, paralyzing feelings. I remember, I was thinking about this knowing that we're going to speak today. I'm going to say I was 7 or 8 years old. We're at the beach in San Clemente, and we're playing on the swings. And you know how kids push each other, on the swings, go as high as you can.
Mhm.
Anyway, I was pushing this boy. Anyway, he fell off. He landed. No one got hurt, but he runs up to me and he goes, "I'm telling the lifeguard, and you're in trouble."
Mm.
I spent the rest of the day just paralyzed. I'm gonna get in trouble. I remember my parents saying, "Why aren't you in the water? So we're at the beach. Why aren't you,
Mhm.
rafting or whatever, But I remember that moment thinking, "Oh my God, I'm bad. I am bad. Not done something wrong. I'm bad."
Mm.
There was a clear demarcation between the two. I mean, kids fool around, but this was like, I'm bad. Okay. And I was going to get nailed. And I remember that. And that's kind of where it felt like the window opened for that. And throughout the years, this malaise would set in. It's, and I always, like we all come to this life with purposes and a plan. And I always had the desire to work with people.
Mhm.
Always, ever since I was a young boy, I remember maybe wanting to be a forest ranger to help the environment. And then um, I was in law enforcement, working with people, working in the ministry, but it just evolved. And shame to me it's the best kept secret among men. I believe women are much more agile with it, much more, yeah, they're agile. They kind of get it. And I think with men, it's so, the sense of you feel paralyzed. You're not good enough. You're not smart enough. You're not capable enough. There's always something's not enough.
So say more about that malaise, that paralyzing feeling.
And the paralyzing feeling is, in psychology, they call it anxiety sometimes or depression. And I feel like this has to be its own chemistry tree,
Mhm.
like its own freestanding diagnostic tree. And that's how I pitched the book back in 2017, 18, 19 was
As a
it
kid, that
right.
feeling for
That
you.
feeling like it's its own freestanding event. And as a young
Mm.
boy, man, uh, just got to
So
work
it's the
through.
same.
Yeah, and it just there was
Okay.
this sense that it was nagging inside. Not that this hasn't this we're growing up because what I've learned, like, you either feel competent or you feel inferior, and that's where shame grows is on the inferior side,
Mm.
and that gets you out of your home metaphorically because Nadia, you talk about being at home, that place within, and shame runs you out of your home. It runs you out of your home. You're homeless. I've never
Right.
quite seen it that way too. As I read your book, I thought, oh my God, we're homeless. Shame moves us out, says we don't belong here. We're not good enough. And that's kind of how I felt over the years trying to compensate for it and getting in the ministry, working with people. And I realized I wanted to do, it felt very tight, but there's always this desire to understand our journey, my path. I hope and it sounds very ambiguous, but there's a lot of events along the way that were very defining, such as having to confront the neighbor on our street who was, at the time, they called him weird, but today he'd be a pedophile.
Mm.
Today he'd be a pedophile, and different things like that on the way. And by the grace of God, these things got resolved, got handled. But the residual of feeling there's something wrong with you, because not it, I didn't really learn how to read till I was in the 7th grade,
Wow.
and it's really hard to talk about it because I felt quote retarded. I know we're not supposed to use that term, but that's how I felt. Like there was something. Oh my God, something's wrong. I just didn't. It was a developmental delay, and that is where the shame really took off in my life.
How old are you?
I, I re- elementary school reading was so hard for me. I would get D's. I would just loathe coming home, showing my parents I was getting a D. I didn't get beaten or anything, but the disdain that I got from my mom and dad. I went to a reading clinic. I went to special reading groups. It just didn't click. And then at about age 12, I got an A in reading.
Mhm.
It all of a sudden just clicked. But the damage and that
But
little boy inside,
for
that's what,
years, it
for
wasn't
years,
reminded.
I always
Okay.
ask my clients, where did it start? And there's like that thing at the beach, but the reading issue, Nadia, shaped me next to being raised with my parents.
Mm.
So at age 13, I'm in junior high back then. They call it middle school today, 7th grade. And this woman goes, what do you like to read? Oh, I like to read the sports page. So I tell my mom, and they get me a subscription to Sports Illustrated. I read it from cover to cover.
Mm.
And then the teacher goes, I want you to give me a book report on Sports Illustrated. And I read it, and she had me read out in front of the class, and it was transformational. But the damage, Nadia, that's I've never really talked about how embarrassing not being able to read.
Dive into that a little bit because
Oh,
that's so pivotal to your work today.
right,
That
and
little
not feeling
boy,
smart. You know, my aunt, she was 20 years older.
physically,
Yeah, my aunt
how
was
did it
20 years
affect?
older than my mom, and
Okay.
she always said to me, Stephen, don't don't get lost in this life. You came here to do something.
Hmm.
Because when I get lost, like it's feeling bad about myself. I'm her 5, 6, or 7. Annie Hazel. I
Mhm.
always thought it was interesting. She had red hair but gray roots, so I thought she dyed her gray roots. I asked her once why she did that. She goes, "Honey, you'll learn someday." Okay. But that really, Nadia, it's interesting because when you asked me to tell a personal story, I meditated on it and I thought, talking about reading is like someone talking about being molested. It
Okay.
carried that level of
Okay.
despair.
And it's interesting you brought up the Anne and the visuals because sometimes for you, did it come up in just a flash scene? And that's
Hmm.
that's that's where that's the only level where it's safe to go to.
Correct. And Nadia, that sent that set the kind of like the template going through school. I worked hard, but that nagging feeling of not feeling like enough. Reading, I did well in school, did very well. Got a scholarship to go to college, but inside Nadia, then I finally went to therapy. I know it's really, I know it's really weird. And this is in the '80s, and I just had to go.
Yeah, wow.
I had to go early '80s because I didn't feel right. College was wonderful. I didn't feel right, and I had a therapist, lovely gentleman, Jamaican, and he said to me, "Stephen, what's the picture you carry in your wallet of yourself?" And it's like your book, Nadia, Top being at home. What's that picture we carry that we have to update? And the picture is that little boy who's at the reading table, overwhelmed.
Wow.
We also have these things called SRA, Scholastic Reading Aptitude Tests, back in the day. And I would see the SRA books come out, and I'd be like, "Ugh," it just didn't click. So
So
that is what got me to many years later to finally, that's what that is, the shame. And it disconnected me from myself. And as you say, finding your home, going back home, I got it moved me out of my own home. It took me many years to make that journey back home, like you've done throughout all your works.
how just let's take a step back
Hmm.
so others can hear how it feels and maybe connect with, "Oh, okay, that's what's going on."
It,
Because it's so powerful to hear from you, Dr. Stephan Poulter, and a man and a doctor. And we don't need to go deeper
Nadia,
because I get it.
Nadia, it is.
Yet the flashes of the scenes, and then you said something that disconnected. So separated,
I rem-
disconnected,
I remember fifth
just
grade
yes.
coming home and I had a D for the semester in reading. I remember looking at that grade. The rest were A's and B's, but I had a D in reading. I remember thinking I wanted to die. I didn't want to kill myself. I wanted it to die. I thought that would be easier than going home.
Wow.
That and people say, "What's the difference between one?"
Fundamentally, like, flawed, like, wrong.
Like, yeah, like, oh, I'll never forget it. It was a rainy day in January, going home. I can feel it now. Every man and every woman also, but because men cover it up with a lot of stuff. I tell them there's a boy inside. We gotta go rescue him. That's the prodigal son. You gotta bring him home. And even though I played sports and look a certain way and whatnot, but deep inside there was a scared little boy. And I was always very defensive when people would say someone's stupid. I go, don't say that. You can't say that. You can't say the S word.
Mm.
No one's stupid. No one's stupid. So I go home that day and I show my mom. And she goes, "You can do better." I go, "Mom, I'm doing everything I can. It's not enough." I know she didn't. She didn't know it. She didn't understand. I don't hold a grudge, but it was really hard. It gave me a work ethic. Gave me a lot of passion to move. So I have a lot of empathy for people when they feel like they've been uh, told they're not good enough or stupid, and it really pushed me. I remember because deep down I knew I wasn't. I knew I wasn't. It's like I was underwater. I had to get to the top of the water to swim. And finally, at about 12 or 13, it got to the surface metaphorically. And then life, it just changed. But that wound is Robert Bly talks about, that wound was very deep, and I spent a lot of time. There was a lot of mud to cover that up.
Are you there? Okay.
Yes.
So
Mm.
from the place that you just felt and so severe of a darkness of a pull that there was consideration, there was suicidality as a child.
And I've never said that
There
publicly.
was a
Yeah,
what's that?
I've never said that, Nadia. I've never told anybody that. So when people tell me they want to die, I go, I get it. I understand. I really do. I really understand that. I understand that despair, Nadia, which you talk about so fluently in your book, so well. Despair.
So your mind, as you know, was causing these thoughts and these feelings.
Hmm.
Somewhere in you, there was also this my truth,
Yes.
and then how you manifested that in your knowing you're going to give something and all the different ways you did. What does it feel like to be right there smack in the middle? I mean, in that anxiety of like the darkness, that young in your first experiences, and then this other thing. How did you navigate that?
It was fascinating, Nadia. I've never have had to describe it this way, and I really appreciate your helping me here. Deep down, I knew in my heart of hearts not to give up. That this was temporary, but keep going forward. I never truly believed I was defective. And I have to throw in I also wore glasses at the time. And wearing glasses back then was not cool. If you wore glasses in elementary school, it wasn't cool. And I knew deep down there's a lot more to this story. There was a lot more to me than just feeling marginalized, feeling very uh, defective. It's hard for guys to say that.
Marginalized, defective.
And I I just knew deep down not to stop. There was
Hmm.
my soul. I didn't know the word then, but there was a part of me that said, I felt like I wasn't hearing voices. There was a part of me, just don't give up. Come on, keep going. You're gonna get this.
So the mind was
The mind was saying a lot, but there was
conflicting itself.
my soul, and we all have it. People talk about your best self, your intuition, your gut. My gut feeling was this isn't. This is only a piece of the story. Don't let it be the whole story.
Mm.
I've had a lot of people get paralyzed emotionally, psychologically by that. It just stopped at a certain age because it's so paralyzing. My thought is if I stop, I'll die. Not literally, but I will die. I'll wither. I just. It was like if I stop here, I'm. It's. It was. That was not
Stopping
an
what?
alternative. It
If
was
you
not an alternative.
stop,
Yeah. Stop believing. Stop pushing. Stop trying. Just keep trying. It's going to go. It's going to move.
I see. So that truth, that light was there in some way, that
Yeah.
core
Yeah.
innocence.
It was in there. I always knew I believed in God in my heart of hearts, in our soul. And at the time, guys didn't talk about this. We played baseball, we did different things, and that was wonderful. I love that. And but that nagging feeling inside, it came and see. I don't want anybody to know that I really had a hard time reading. I got better with reading as I got into um, later in middle school and into high school, but I just didn't want anybody to know.
So your peers, how did they respond to you?
It One thing that's good about kids, a lot of times they have amnesia. You know, they're and even like, get ready for school. Oh, we're going to school today? Yes, we go to school Monday through Friday. Amnesia. I found my peers were not, no one was as harsh on me as I was.
Hmm.
Nobody was as critical as I was internally.
They were probably worrying about their own insecurities.
Exactly. We got along, like they had a problem with, math. I could figure out math. I could write. I had no problem writing,
Mhm.
memorizing stuff, but reading, oh my God, Nadia, it'd be like you telling me right now, Stephen, we're gonna learn Mandarin today. Ugh, I don't know Mandarin. Uh, that's about how it felt. Like I know nothing. I'd go to the supermarket with my mom, and I'd read the labels on the cans of food. I was not giving up on it.
Wow.
And she goes, "Go
So
get
you
some
had that.
Hunt's. Go get some
Mhm.
Hunt's ketchup." And she goes, "I want Hunt's." It wasn't said. And she wanted me to figure out. It really helped me.
So that little part of you, yet big part that was keep going, keep moving forward, you had some encouragement of that
Something
on
within
on
us.
the outside
I did. But there's Nadia. It's
versus
like
others. Yes, go ahead.
no, no, no. Something pulls us. C.S. Lewis said, "Someone says, well, I don't believe in God." He goes, "What? Do you want to be a better person? Oh yes. Do you want to keep growing? Yes. That's the spirit of God inside of you."
Love
And I knew it, Nadia, but I couldn't articulate it. I didn't know how to explain it. And that was the hard
it. That
part.
is that's the core innocence and soul that has never changed.
Right. I, we went to church. I went to Lutheran church, and it all made sense to me.
Mhm.
Like God's alive and well and living today, and that made sense to me. But we all wanted to be better, and I knew that was my soul. So in the Catholic Church, they have communion when you're in the 8th grade or confirmation. So we had confirmation at Lutheran Church, and I had to take this test and then sit down with the pastor. And he says, "Stephen, which been your biggest struggle God's helped you with?" I'm 15 years old, Nadia, and acne, and those things. I said, and I said to him, I go, "Pastor Nelson, God helped me to read." He goes, "What? What are you talking about?"
Wow.
And I really had a struggle with reading, and it's been really hard. He goes, "I never knew that." And he goes, "I thought it was your family." My, well, I'm not going
Now
to
what
argue,
was
sir.
that moment like?
It was
What was that putting
it
words on what had, you know, I
Nadia.
held you captive for years?
That was the first time I experienced the divine.
Mm.
I knew there was a lot more here than I ever imagined spiritually, psychologically. I thought, okay, it's as if the people talk about portals. It opened. I felt I had chills go up and down my spine.
I believe it. I feel like this is a moment where you had real human connection because you were allowed safely to be vulnerable.
And Pastor Nelson, just looked at me. He goes, "Really?" I go, "Sir, why do you think I'm a loud kid sometimes and I don't want to concentrate? Because I don't want you to make me read." He's like, "Oh."
Mm.
There's a moment. And then,
It just when you say a, a moment, did it just was it because it was all made literal?
yes, it was the shame. Shame cannot withstand exposure.
Okay.
That moment, it was exposed. And it's like everything just, I, the word I use, I felt emancipated.
Wow.
I was spiritually emancipated. I knew that that feeling was only a feeling, not the truth. And
All of the way that shame manifested, that it was a feeling.
absolutely. And I believe that
Wow.
the shame factor, um, I want to do more work with this, the book, but really help people because it's within them. It's that disconnection. And shame is, we all have a gold. Someone said there's this story about this gold Buddha that got covered. They hid it in this cave in Tibet. It was hidden and it was forgotten for hundreds of years. And then one winter, this terrible flood came by and it washed all the mud away.
Hmm.
They had no idea there was a gold Buddha statue inside that cave. And the monk says, "That's inside of us." And the mud is shame. And
Wow.
I have learned, I tell men and women, our job is to hose, wash that mud off to get to the gold within us. That's our divine self. And psychology is one of the roads to it. And there's many roads to Rome. I always say, whatever road you're on, stay on it. Just keep going. What's the old saying, Nadia? That it's not that people don't find God, is they stop going forward. They stop on their journey. And God's within them. And I remember hearing that story years ago. Shame is mud. It covers you up. And after a while, you think that's all there is. There is no gold in there. There's no value. And your book is all about finding that.
Mm.
And that's the home. That's the home. And so I felt my contribution what is I want to do is to empower people to move past that, get reconnected to their best self. Someone asked me, a teenager asked me this, a teenager, he's 20. He goes, "Hey, Dr. P, what's your life plan?" He asked me this last Thursday night. And I go, "Leo, my plan is to empower young men like you to find their best self because that changes the world.
Yes.
And when you find your best self, good things happen. It has nothing to do with your circumstances.
Nothing.
Zero." Nadia, you asked me, first of all, it was a pleasure to meet you and connecting with you. And you asked me, "Steve, we're going to talk about your personal story." I have to tell you inside, I went, "Oh, okay, I'm going to do this." I really like you. And I thought, I'm going to do this. And I had no idea we were going to talk about reading today, but I knew we were going to talk about reading today. Like deep down, I knew we were going to talk about reading because,
And your glasses seem to be
oh,
hmm,
at age
another
15,
one.
oh my God, I got contact lenses when I was 15. I'm
Wow.
telling you, Nadia, the world changed.
So, were you shamed from the outside from because you had all this internal stuff with reading and then the maybe the perhaps the outside labels and but it seemed like that was really your internal
That was on
thing,
me. Yeah.
but with
My,
the glasses, what was that?
you know,
Did you
I
get
think
outside shaming and made fun
not,
of?
yes and no, not really. I remember
Okay.
it, in our neighborhood growing, there was like 40 kids in our age group,
Mhm.
and a lot of some
Wow.
of the guys wore glasses, and some of the girls. That wasn't the issue. It was what I carried inside me was the issue.
Okay.
I see. I was good enough at sports not to get picked on.
Okay. Interesting.
I was smart enough. I could help guys. I could help. People always thought I was smart. I just didn't let on about my reading challenge.
I see.
My
So as
mom.
long as you were succeeding and doing that
Mhm,
well, and what did that kind of duality create in you? Did you feel like the imposter syndrome or something of the sort? Like,
absolutely.
not to
Oh,
overanalyze,
yeah.
but
No, 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 no.
what
That's unanalyzed. That's
anxiety did that
oh
make?
no. Oh my God, that huge. And it pushed me to work really hard
Mhm.
because I didn't because that nagging feeling, that nagging shame is it disconnects us from our best self. Because shame says you need to be perfect, and perfect is self-loathing. The pursuit of perfection is self-loathing. Good enough isn't a B minus. Good enough is an A plus. Perfection is death. There's nothing about perfection that breeds stability.
Say more.
I knew that I wasn't going to be perfect. I think that really saved me because I had
Back
this.
then you did?
Yeah, that's not going to happen. Check the that's off the radar screen. That's not happening because shame. But I had so many guys that wanted to be perfect, get a perfect score, perfect grades, perfect appearance. I'm like, no, 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 come on, that doesn't work because I knew deep down I'm not perfect. Good God, I could barely read. Now I picked up the gap, but I saw
Mhm.
that insidious belief that if you're perfect, you're lovable. I didn't lovable. That was I didn't even understand that term, but I knew that there's no way I'm going to be perfect.
So this is around 15 after
15,
the
yeah,
conversation with the
hmm
pastor?
pastor, hmm
Something really flipped in there.
it did, and then through high school, I didn't really reconnect to it until I was about 18. I thought I cannot go through life without that reconnection, and it
It's
came.
so interesting that putting the reality that kept you just locked in for years as a child and then putting it in words and having somebody
Mm.
look you in the eye and say, "Really?"
He,
Changed.
he
So
goes,
from there on, you were able to accept
no, no, no. Accepts big.
and
Okay, that I love that
not
you're.
accept, but and
No, no, that's fair.
go ahead.
It was the beginning of acceptance. It's like
Okay,
peeling an onion. you know,
totally.
yeah, absolutely.
No, I what I meant is all
Yeah,
of a sudden you're like, "Okay, this has been said." Not literally, but you had that experience,
yep,
and then you're like, "I will never be perfect to the outside world."
yeah. There's no way. I'm not buying into that.
Okay.
I'm not buying into that. And I feel like in the grace of God, that's like, okay, like that just went right by me. It wasn't about looks, weight, any of that. Not happening. It's like
Okay.
I burned through that by the fifth grade. It's like
Okay.
that's off the table.
So, in your book, you
Yes.
talk about, I believe, a moment around this time in your life where maybe it was later, you're with a therapist and they put a name
Yes.
on what you had been experiencing. Was that around this time?
That was a little bit later. That was in my early 20s.
Okay.
But I'm going to tell you, Nadia, that moment, if I in my lifeline, you make a big demarcation. That was a seminal event.
Between the 15 and the pastor and
Hmm.
between this time, how
I
were
would,
you navigating it? It was this dual, I'll never be perfect, but I'm good enough.
and
I'm
then,
lovable enough through the
mhm,
sports and other stuff. Was that
and
it?
it part of it, and then also I got involved in uh, an evangelical church, which was very positive because it helped me to see that my spiritual life. It got me to the spiritual side of me. Helped me, it introduced me, helped me to
Mm,
remember what we all remember from prior lifetimes about our spiritual path. And I found that to be very empowering. I didn't buy into the perfection about being a sinner or not, but that really did impact me too because shame and sin are the same word.
mm,
Because guilt is an action, shame is a feeling. And I always thought it was odd people say I'm a sinner. Well, you make bad decisions, but you also make good decisions.
mhm.
I never bought into that.
Okay.
It's like it just didn't. It's like two magnets. It repelled, and I knew that yes, I've made poor decisions sometimes. I made good ones too. And sin, I think, is another word for shame.
Interesting.
Because shame is that you're defective. Sin, that we're sinners. We're defective. Very problematic. I found the church. It's really what pushed me into psychology because I was thinking about becoming a pastor. And I had so many people when I was a
So late
high,
teens?
yeah, late teens, early 20s, a high school pastor come in and
Mm,
talk about how they felt they're so wrecked as a person, they're ruined. And I'm like, oh, no, you're not. It's just it's part of the pie chart. And it really pushed me, Nadia. I thought this isn't,
you
we're not getting the
knew.
whole picture.
You saw the innocence in others.
Right.
You you
Yeah.
saw that they were fundamentally good and that
Yes. And
the
there's
label okay,
the, the
very
label
early on.
early on. And I know I didn't have the tools to address it.
Mm.
And that sent me on this path. I
So
saw the,
where did you go after high school?
I mean, I went to
With that?
college and then I got into, I was a policeman. Then I went to seminary. I know it was a wild ride. Worked at a church. I went to seminary. It was a bumpy road, but I kept moving forward. Going to seminary, I realized I cannot be an ordained pastor. It's too narrow. And through that, I found the school of psychology at Fuller Seminary. I thought, this makes sense because
Okay.
psychology put gi- gives us handles to these expressions and feelings. It identifies them.
Oh,
That was life changing. And my therapist at the time, I think I was the only guy I knew had ever gone to therapy. I mean,
that must have created a whole other
oh
set
my
of
God, I didn't tell
shame.
I told nobody. I mean, it was like best kept secret. And he said, "You have shame." I go, "What's that?" He goes, "You feel defective, and you're
Mm,
not. You're wounded." I'm like, "Oh my God!" It changed my life.
say more about that
Changed
moment.
my life because I realized that it was that we're moving. That I'm not the only one that feels this way. I realized, oh my God, this is universal, and there are people that see it. And I wanted to know more about it so I could share it. Honestly, I want to share it.
Wow. That's exactly what we're going to do in
Share
part two. That's exactly where we're going
it.
to start.
Nadia, I'm telling you, this talking this through with you is incredible because it's as if I've never spoken about it. It feels so present and real because people want to feel better. And I remember my therapist, his first name's Winston. He goes, "You want to feel better, don't you?" I go, "Absolutely." He goes, "Well, we have to deal with the shame."
Yes.
And I found it depressed me, made me anxious, but I wasn't depressed or anxious. Those were secondary
Mhm.
causes. The root was feeling defective. And people say, "Well, don't you feel whole in Jesus in your spiritual life?" No. I'd say no because I got it's true, but it there's healings that had to happen. The process of healing and learning and forgiving.
Okay. That's where we're going to start.
Yes.
Everyone, please listen to part two of this because we will dive straight in to Dr. Stephan Poulter's What
Thank you.
is the Shame Factor? So
Yes.
please listen to part two. Thank you so much. Thank
You'll,
you so, so much.
Of a flame that never dies.
You are not alone. If you are dealing with shame and trauma, please reach out to me through my website, nadia-davis.com. You can get a free band shame tip sheet and find out about upcoming events. I'd love it if you picked up my book, Home is Within You, wherever books are sold. If you like this podcast, please tell a friend, leave a review, and make sure to follow me on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Sending warm hugs.